we go. So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good day, good night. Wherever, however this meditation finds you. See if you can allow whatever is arising in this moment in time. And the simplest way of doing that might be to just welcome the breath, welcome the mind, the thoughts, different parts of ourselves. Sensations in the body. Emotions, feelings. Contractions, tensions, oppositions, anything that arises. See if you can roll out the welcome mat. So we're not resisting, but neither are we clinging or overly attaching. If you imagine a linear scale, at one end we have resistance. At the other end we have attachment or clinging. We can pendulate or oscillate or vacillate in between those two. Hopefully finding some kind of midpoint. We have the ability to be with whatever is unfolding without resisting or clinging. So if there's something that is disturbing our peace that surfaces, we don't resist it. On the other end, if there's something really pleasurable that arises, we're not clinging to it. So see if you can allow yourself to invite this sense of being in the middle. Being in the middle means to understand that on the human level, in finite form, everything is in permanent state of flux. So resistance is futile, clinging is futile. See if you can invite this. So before we go further, see if you can attend to the comfort of your being, your entire being. Notice what needs to move, what position will serve your body, so that you can find this centeredness of neither resisting nor clinging. And notice that you can always move. So if you start off seated with a straight back, you can always really allow gravity to pull you back and lie down. You can roll around on the floor, twist and turn. There's no right way for you to be right now other than what you are. And having said that, the invitation is to be somewhere in the middle. If we do find ourselves at the resistance end or the clinging end, we don't resist that, we allow it. So we don't resist resistance until such point when we're ready to come back into the middle. So everything has a natural ending. And notice how you are in this moment. What does your body need? How can you settle just a little bit more and allow gravity to take even the smallest parts of you? Tiny little cells that are whizzing about in your body. How can they start to settle? Little tiny murmurations of your heart. How can they start to settle? Any twinges, any resistance in the neck, in the shoulders. How can they start to settle? Maybe sighing, yawning, stretching. These meditations are not about attaining anything. They're about allowing what is to its fullest, inhabiting your human self fully. Paradoxically, when we inhabit the human form, the transcendent becomes more apparent. This is what the paradox is. When we don't resist the human form, when we fully inhabit and let be that which is, the transcendent shines through the self. This is the self with a capital S. So in this next 40 minutes, I'd like to touch on what non-duality is within the context of IFS, internal family systems. So non-duality simply means no separation in between the absolute ground of being, otherwise known as the One, and its many forms, the multiplicity, that which we are, you and I, 8 billion others. That's in the external, but in the internal, there's an infinite multiplicity. So the basic premise of non-duality means that we're not separate. Our human form, the finite form that we are, is not separate from the absolute, the infinite. Oh, why is that relevant for IFS? IFS is a psycho-spiritual model. So the psychology part of it that belongs to the psyche, the part of us that is in this finite. We can envisage this as being the horizontal aspect. This is the kind of the human, the immanent aspect. The spiritual part of the model, the IFS model, is the transcendental or transpersonal aspect, and that exists along the vertical axes. Now, if you imagine, let's see if we can embody this in this moment. This is a lot of words. If you imagine the center of your gravity, note where that is for you. For many people, it's somewhere close to the navel or a little bit lower. Sometimes in Chinese medicine, it's called the lower dantian. If you imagine that as the 0 point, if you extend now downwards and upwards in a vertical line, this is the transcendental or transpersonal axis of the IFS model. Now from the 0 point again, if you extend a horizontal line to the left and to the right, running through the central point of your gravity, this is the individual psyche that each of us are. The unique, distinct but not separate. If you imagine now the center of your gravity, these two lines, one vertical, one horizontal, extending out. You could give the line a color. It could be a luminous line of light or a golden thread. Your transpersonal, spiritual, transcendental aspect exists along the vertical. This is the realm of the higher self. Or in IFS, we call this the waveform self. And then along the horizontal, we have our physical body, our mind, our precious parts, our desires, needs, wants. This is our tribal self too. So non-duality means that those two separate axes, the X horizontal axes and the Y vertical axes, non-duality means they're not separate, they're intertwined. And IFS is so fantastically placed as a framework for becoming the bodhisattva of your own psyche along the transcendental axis and along the physical axis. To bypass one would be a loss. To bypass the other would be an equal loss. We must meet somewhere in the middle of the two, or the four limbs. You see how that feels to tune into in your body right now. To find the meeting point of these two axes here. And for some people, it'll be at the heart center. For some people, it'll be at the navel. For some people, it might be at the third eye. And just attune to this quality of being in the center of these two aspects of what it means to be a psycho-spiritual being. If you like, a very simple way of conveying these two truths is that if you imagine your breath as the physical property, if we each take a breath in now, this is the physical aspect. The dimensionless, formless space within which that breath falls into is the transcendental aspect. And in a human being, they co-arise or co-emerge. We can't separate, we can't peel the two apart. So the breath is the physical quality, the pure awareness of breathing, the space within which the breath falls in is the transcendental quality. And there is no hierarchical meaning here. One isn't better than the other. There are They're lovers, they're intertwined lovers. They have an affinity for each other. Two sides of the same coin. Sometimes we say that the screen upon which the parts manifest, or the aspects of the movie play, the screen itself is the pure awareness, pure being, that transcendental. And then the movie that plays is all the different parts, the mind. And you can't peel the movie away from the surface upon which it plays. That's not possible. The two are intimately linked. If you want to watch a film, the two must happen at the same time. And the same thing with a human. We're not just humans having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. The yin and the yang. The both and. So for me, the non-dual approach to IFS is to find balance in between those two axes, the vertical and the horizontal. Because they're not separate. If we go too far on the transcendental axes, the vertical axes, we lose our humanness. And we may veer into the realm of what's called spiritual bypass. Now, along the horizontal axes, if we only believe ourselves to be material beings in a physical world, we feel separate. We lose meaning. And we run the risk of being hyper individual, closed off, separate islands. Often we can put up walls around our sense of separateness. This is mine, this is yours. And we forget that we're porous beings, we're interdependent beings. The very surface that you're sat on is the result of another human being involved in making that which you currently sit on. Countless humans. The breakfast you ate this morning was grown by farmers. Delivered by truck drivers. Stacked on the shelves in the supermarket. And of course, even further down, the earth itself, nature, the sun, the rain, the seeds, the birds, the bees. So when we veer off too far on both the axes, we find ourselves as separate being, either separate from our humanness or separate from our sacredness. And in the middle, in IFS terms, that's what we would call self-leadership. So self-leadership is a point of centeredness that equally values our immanence and our transcendence, our humanness and our divinity, our form and formlessness, our multiplicity and unity. And nature has really inherent desire to flow in the middle, to flow with ease. What does water do from the top of a mountain? Does it resist flowing down? Or in its desire to reach the bottom, does it somehow speed up, clinging, wanting to reach the ground fastest? Or does it just flow unobstructed, unobscured, unhindered? And we are nature. We're not outside of nature. We are nature. And so there's a natural, inherent desire in all of us to flow unencumbered down the center of our sacred human heart. When we're in the middle, there's nothing to transcend. When we're in the middle, there's nothing to reject. There's nothing to cling to. Nothing to let go. Nothing to aspire to. I invite you to find this point of centeredness in your being, in your body. Wherever that is, in the third eye, in the heart, in the navel, maybe in the flow of the breath, wherever that centeredness is. And sometimes, if you're finding it hard to find that middle centered place in your body, we can arrive at it by looking at the polar opposites. And then pendulating in between, swinging like a marble in between two poles until the marble settles down to its still center point. So if right now centeredness is something that is unattainable for you, that's perfect. Don't resist. Don't seek it. Find that which is most present for you. And that could be a sense of anxiety or buzzing, jittering, thinking. Locate that in your body or near your body, wherever it is. Allow it to be as it is. Allow it fully. And then notice if it naturally flips to its opposite. Maybe there's a space, a part of you, no matter how tiny, in your little toe, in your little finger. In the tiny little hairs on your cheek. See if you can find the opposite, the stillness, the calm, that which isn't thinking, that which isn't worrying, that which is just existing unencumbered. And now we pendulate. Imagine being able to swing between these two polar opposites. And can you allow yourself, as you pass through, to start to become aware of the midpoint in between the two? So the midpoint neither clings to nor rejects what is. It's a little bit like the open sky that allows the clouds to pass through. It's the effortlessness of the water flowing from the top of the mountain downwards, downwards, downwards. So sometimes it can be easy for us to find that center point. Sometimes we may need to focus on the extreme polar opposites and then pendulate and swing and fluidly ease ourselves into the midpoint. And sometimes it's impossible to even do that. And then we simply open up. Open, open, deeper, deeper, deeper. Become more of what is in the present moment. Paradoxically, the deeper we inhabit that which is already here, which is present, we find presence. Typically, there's parts of us that are afraid of inhabiting fear, grief, sadness, because we fear getting lost in it. But you can't get lost in consciousness. You can only find yourself in consciousness. You can only find the presence that's beneath the activity of grief, the activity of sadness, the activity of loss, of anxiety. Or joy, or love. Any label, be that in the positive or the negative, any label we can think of, when we follow that label down to its fundamental state, we find presence, we find being. And sometimes that can feel like void, like nothingness. And that can be scary for young parts because they fear being lost. They fear dying in this void, in this nothingness, in this presence. But when we're in the centered, non-dual space, the loss is gain, lost is found, dying is being birthed, formlessness is form, void is fullness. Can you see? Nothing's lost, nothing's gained. But when we don't reject the feelings that terrify our parts, they become spiritual food for presence. The very feelings that we reject in ourselves is the very nourishment that we need in order to attune to presence. When we reject those, we starve. We become incomplete. we become colorless, we lose our vitality. Because those emotions are full of energy. And when we inhabit them fully, we unlock that energy. We attain the ability to do the both and, to feel the joy in the grief. This is the paradox. This is the vital energy. So we wither, we waste away when we reject flow of energy, because we label some energy good, some energy bad, some energy worthy, some energy unworthy. And so we tend to walk around malnourished, spiritually malnourished. This is what it means to eat your daily bread, to feast on your being, to feast on everything that is here to feast on. So, as we come to the end of this meditation, if you can feast a little bit more on just your breath and your awareness of the breath. That's all. And as you allow this journey to come to an end, if you can invite any stretching, yawning, sighing, moving, and continue to have that sense of feasting on everything that unfolds moment by moment. Maybe there's gratitude that lands for the different parts. Maybe there's gratitude for your physical self, personal self, and transpersonal self. Gratitude for the both and. Before we come back to the group, see if you can first take a moment to orient yourself, locate yourself in the space that you're in, looking around, maybe turning around behind you, noticing what's there. Looking at things with a fresh perspective, fresh eyes. This is where you live. This is where your life unfolds.